So the first month and a half of after my marriage was a blur. It was filled with a consistent rotation of conversations that were painful and contained brutally honest statements from my husband that in which he shared how he felt about marriage, monogamy, about our relationship, how he, what other relationships he had had. And as time went on, it was revealed there were several other people that he had mentioned that he had affairs with just in this 1 year. I think there were about 3 or 4 others that he had admitted to seeing, and it was just unreal. And I had the life just like knocked out of me. I was still fighting a very bad cold that I could not get over. The cough just lasted for weeks, partially because my immune system was so beaten down. And so I was completely isolating, working and then going straight home, or in many cases just going to the gym to pursue self-care and to go to the sauna and the steam room, and just doing things that helped me, because I was now perpetually in my head. Every time I had a moment alone, I was thinking about what had happened and replaying conversations in my head that we were discussing that were confusing or unfair or imbalanced. And it was tough. I was just going, and it was so lonely. My husband stopped coming home regularly, which he had never done before, but now it was like, well, I'm honest with you, and this is what I want, and why are we pretending anymore? And I remember just telling him, I understand this is what you want, but this really hurts me. I'm still trying to get used to this. I'm still trying to understand what's happening. I'm still trying to accept it. It would mean a lot to me if you would just come home. You've been doing this for years and you came home. So, could you please just respect the marriage while we are still married and we still live and work together? Could you just please respect and honor this relationship so that I don't have to deal with that? And he just, told me, he said, well, I'm doing what I wanted to do for the last 3 years, which is not come home to you. And he said it so nonchalantly and just kind of like, hey, like, this is what it is. And, now so what does it matter? And, that was another indication of a lack of compassion and empathy. He was only really concerned with what he wanted and how he felt. And he thought, well, the facts, so get over it. And it's like, that's just like, if you are a really feeling person, like, you can't just get over it with a snap or a push of a button. Like, you have to process it, and you have, it doesn't work that way. And it was just this kind of frustration with my lack of keeping up and moving on. It was unreal that he was just expecting me to just be good, like, because I knew now. And it's like, well, you've known this whole time. I'm just learning, and I've also just spent 5 years in a relationship with you that I thought was sincere and mutually committed, and I'm still, and I haven't had a chance to process. Like, it's just like, could you just hold on for a second, because you're also still asking me to consider being with you, and we're in therapy every week, and I'm telling you, like, this is really bothering me. This is bothering me. Like, I understand you're having this affair. I know you're not going to stop seeing her. And, that's your prerogative. I can't control you, but I'm just asking you, as long, like, we're in this house together. Like we share a home. We don't have separate rooms. We have this like large open space, 2 levels, but open. And there just weren't separate sleeping areas there. It was just one large home for us to be in. And, he, would come home and, pack a bag and head out. And it was like I was with a roommate all of a sudden. And, he was still kind in some ways. It was, on and off. But he didn't really seem that interested in how I was feeling too much. Like it was just kind of like an inconvenience, and kind of like he just seemed really caught up in his own stuff. And it was funny because, well, not necessarily funny, but the same week he returned, I noticed he wasn't, he had taken that time off for his vacation, which was all, deserved, and, he wasn't supposed to be working. But when he got back, I noticed that things weren't getting done, and he wasn't being responsive to clients, and he wasn't getting things done that were due. And he hadn't paid me, and I just was, so I just had a talk with him and just said, I know it's a really rough time for us, and this is a really hard situation to deal with, but we have a business to run, and we have bills to pay, and I need you to focus. I need you to focus and get your head back in the game, because we got to get this work done. And I remember at that moment, because I was just trying to appeal to his being responsible. Like, okay, maybe he's just completely in love and infatuated and just wants to always be around this person and do fun things. But it was like we still have a business to run, and we have responsibilities and reputations to maintain. And I need you to focus. Like, you've been gone for, almost 2 weeks. I need you to focus back on the task at hand, because this is what pays the bills. And remember him saying to me, and this was, it was completely, I was blown away. He just kind of like, I showed him a lot of compassion and understanding, and I didn't talk about me and this is hard on me. I used us and we, and that unified, like, we're on the same team here. Like, this sucks for both of us right now. I know it's hard, but we got to keep our work going. And that's what I did. Like, through this, I didn't miss a day of work when this was happening. I was, devastated, and left on my own for, over a week, knowing that my partner and husband was, actively with somebody else at a time when he should have been with me. And I kept it together, and I performed, and I didn't let anyone know I was going through stuff. I had a lot of meetings, and this is right before COVID hit. Had a lot of meetings, and they were in person, with our teams. And I showed up and was our representative, and I was in so much pain. But I showed up, and I got the work done. And so, as I'm standing there, and I'm like, I know it's hard, and I go and I kind of grab him and hold him, and I'm just like, and then he says, this is just so hard. I've been through so much trauma. I've been through too much. This is too much. Those last 2 weeks have been just too much. And I hugged him, and he started crying, and that was another indication that something was really, really off, because he was so self-involved with what he had gone through, which was the exposure, right? Mind you, the last 2 weeks also included a trip out of the country with his friends and his mistress. But this was just too much for him, and he'd been through so much trauma, and and I was like, well, I understand, we both have. And, I held him, and I knew something was really just off with that, because this was all self-concerned sadness. he was concerned with his feelings and how he had been affected. There was no we, there was no I did this to you, I'm sorry. Like nothing, there was nothing about his act or role in it. It was like how this was affecting him, how this situation was affecting him, and how much trauma he had experienced. And that was really like, I mean, all of these other things were kind of helping me to put the pieces together to realize I was dealing with something unusual. And, you know, I'd been starting to do research and just trying to understand, like, you know, this person is withholding sex. This person is, you know, lacking empathy. This person is pathologically lying. Like, what is this? And I came to the realization that I could be dealing with some form of personality disorder just by looking up the sex issues and because I had never heard of someone just completely not showing any arousal or interest in a woman, but then revealing later that he was having pretty healthy sex life outside of our relationship. And so I stumbled across, I started looking into sex addictions, or I was just trying to figure out like what this was, and I didn't know what it was called. And I came across this term called intimacy anorexia. And that is essentially the intimate anorexic partner is the one that is unable to show and give and provide love and care and true vulnerability to their partner. They withhold it from that person, specifically their intimate partner, and they give it to everybody else. And so I stumbled across this page on Wiki, and it just opened up a whole world and universe to me, because in that article or in that listing, there was this idea that this was related in some ways to narcissistic personality or narcissistic abuse or narcissism. And I went down that rabbit hole to kind of try to put the pieces together, because I knew I was dealing with something that was atypical. I had been cheated on in the past. I've dated selfish people. I've checked all the boxes, but there was something really different about this, because it was like it came out of nowhere, but it didn't come out of nowhere. It was happening the whole time, but it was so covert, and the withholding and the narcissistic abuse cycle that I started learning about, cycle of abuse, I started to kind of identify that there were some similarities in what I was experiencing in my relationship. And then I started reading and got a few books and just started educating myself, because there was this itch that needed to be scratched. In my view, this didn't make any sense. You know, I didn't have a gun to his head. I didn't understand why he couldn't take responsibility. There were some times, for instance, like he would slightly, so he would use this term, we weren't having sex, and then he'd say, I recognize it's me, but we weren't having sex. And so he would say a fact, but he would also partially admit that this was him, but then it's like, well, the fact still remains we weren't, so what I'm saying is still true. And so we would have those types of conversations, or he would just like blame shift completely, or, we'd be talking about one thing and then all of a sudden we are talking about a completely different issue that's somewhat related, but not directly related to the topic at hand. And then I'd have to like redirect and be like, well, why are we talking about this? Like, this is what we're talking about. Why does that matter? So I feel like I was constantly there was a lot of diversion tactics. And as I started to learn more, I was seeing some similarities, but I also was like, this is not him. Like, he's not grandiose. He's not he doesn't brag. You know, he went to great